Hey everyone, welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy's Ted, hanging out here at GenCon with special guest Monty Cook. Today we're going to talk about tips and tricks for running your best game ever for role-playing games. Jump down the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy. All right, Monty, if you want to share where people can find you, who you are, I know most of you guys out there certainly know who he is, but for those that don't, go ahead, sir.
I'm Monty Cook. I've been a game designer, professional game designer now for 30 years. Worked on D&D, 2nd edition, 3rd edition. I've got my own company now, Monte Cook Games. We do Numenera, The Strange, No Thank You Evil,
Cypher System.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fantastic games. You have a KickStarter that's coming up. That's really on this vein. So do you want to get into that real quick before we dive into the content?
Sure. It's going on now, and it's called Your Best Game Ever, and it is for a book called Your Best Game Ever. It's really for 2 books. For Your Best Game Ever, we're also going to take the Cypher System rulebook and do a new version of that so that it's kind of a companion volume with Your Best Game Ever. Because what we're going to do in Your Best Game Ever is just introduce all these ideas and ways that you can play any role-playing game. It's not tied to any system at all. You can play any role-playing game, get the most out of your session, and introduce new cool options and things like that to any game. And then we'll make the Cypher System kind of speak to that directly. Yeah.
So whether you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, Numenera, Cypher System, what are some of the tips and tricks that you've got from over the years? Whether it be some of the stuff from the book that you're willing and able to share, or whether it's other stuff, let's get into that.
Sure. So, you go back. I wrote the Dungeon Master's Guide for 3rd edition, right? So I've done sort of the GM advice thing a lot. And there's going to be a lot of GM advice in this book, too. What I think is really exciting is that we're going to put a lot of player advice, right?
Okay.
And so it can be things like, it's all the stuff that, you and I do all the time and have done for years, but put on paper, right? So that like somebody who's just coming to the hobby, or maybe someone who's been playing a long time that can't quite figure something out, and here's some advice, right? So it's things like, what do you do if you've invited somebody to join your group, you're playing, and it's just not working out. Right.
For us, like when somebody is not meshing well, like for me, the best thing to do is you need to have a conversation. And
yes.
we get questions all the time about my player won't do X, or my GM won't see my side, right. And they come to us over and over again, and it's like, okay, step 1, did you have a conversation?
Right.
And this is the biggest thing that so many people are afraid to do. It's like, Did you try talking? Did you try having communication? Now this doesn't solve every problem. It doesn't change. Well, the GM disagrees with my rules call, or the player disagrees with my rules call. Well, I can't change that aspect.
Right.
But when it comes to people talking back and forth, most things can be resolved with a conversation to some degree. And if you can get to a happy medium, you're great.
I agree completely. And the only thing that I would add is so many times I think we think that it's purely the game master's responsibility to take care of problems like this. And I don't think that's the case at all, right? I think it's a group activity. You're having fun with a group, so when the problems come along, you got to solve them as a group too.
This is a group game, a group dynamic. This is something that you are going to have to put together. If you've got a problem player, he or she is not meshing well with the group. Well, can someone who is a little bit, more neutral, low key, able to sit next to them and, control the temper outbursts, or, rein them in, or lift them up if they're feeling like, oh, well, I'm not getting my time.
Right.
As a fellow player at the table, you can turn and say, oh, well, what is your opinion on the matter? That encourages the role playing and gets them, moving in.
I totally agree. If you've got, for example, like, one thing that I see a lot is the player who is like telling the other player, giving them advice, right? Oh, what you ought to do is use this spell, right? Or whatever. And that can be useful sometimes, but it can also be like, okay,
it can be daunting because it's like as a player, if someone sitting next to me is constantly telling me what I should do, I'm not feeling like I'm having an informed choice. I'm not getting to choose. You're playing two characters.
But right, exactly, right. One of the things I think you can do is like look at the situation and see, okay, why is this person doing that? Is it because they're just so enthusiastic? Because if they are, you can channel that, into something else, right? Are they doing it because, they're actually, a little bored? If the guy playing the fighter is always telling the guy playing the wizard what spell to cast, maybe he ought to be playing a wizard.
There's always times where someone wants to be playing the other character.
Yeah.
There's times that there's an impatience factor.
Yeah.
Now, I've not been gaming as long as you, sir, but I've got 25-ish years playing a variety of different role-playing games, and I look at times and it's like, all right, this person is taking a little bit too long to take their turn. Combats in a variety of different role-playing games can take a little bit longer, and when you have a game where there's lots of choices, it's like, well, what actions are you going to take? So like there's sometimes I have to like hold back and be like, okay, well, what can you do to speed up your turn? And we've done a number of different things, video-wise, to have that turn speed up type of thing. It's like have a go-to action. If you're unsure what to do, what do you do?
Right.
If you want to use like a 5th edition rules, well, do you want to take the dodge action? Do you want to cast a cantrip? Do you want to, retreat and cast a spell? Like there's a variety of different things to do, but that can be system agnostic. You can have that go-to action for any game, because realistically, if your PC, your player character is going to be an adventurer, he should have something like that you're aware of, and you can literally write it down, put it on a sticky note,
right?
An index card, be like, my go-to action is X, and boom. Therefore, when you are undecided, you do that. Move on.
One of the things that I like to do with the guy who is, the undecided player is kind of encourage them to, okay, you don't know what you're going to do, then take a breather, right? And your character looks around. Like if you're in the middle of a fight, you kind of assess the situation. And I always try to reward, if somebody takes that action, I always try to give them some valuable insight.
Assess the situation, look for an advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
And, it's like, okay, well, you didn't make an attack this turn, but you notice that guy's on horrible footing, so you give that to somebody else.
Exactly.
In some games, there's the help action that you can do, which gives somebody a better chance of doing something. So like, those are things that are certainly a possibility.
Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, I think that there can be kind of decision fatigue sometimes. You're like, you've got so many choices, you've got all these different special abilities or all these things you can do, right? It can be kind of overwhelming. So I think sometimes kind of helping guide people to sort of those realistic things, right? I mean, because if you were in the middle of some crazy hectic thing, it would be smart to just kind of take a minute and figure out what's going on, right?
And that's something that not a lot of players really do. It's like, well, me taking the help action, what does that do? Okay, well, I might in D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, that's going to give you advantage.
Right.
For Numenera or the Cypher System, it's going to lower their DC by 1.
For sure.
So like that can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
It's like, oh well, you just lowered that check by 3 on what they need on that D20. So like that can be a big difference.
One of those gaming moments that I love is like where you've got one person and they're taking an action, but like the other people at the table are all doing something that, like the help action or something that aids them, so that when it comes down to that die roll, it's actually everybody at the table who's like focused on it, because it's like a group action, right?
And the thing that I don't think a lot of GMs really do, or even in some cases, sometimes players, they don't think about, well, visually, if I look at a fight of what's going on, like, okay, well, you're gonna do the help action. Well, what does that really mean? Like, visually, what am I doing? It's like, oh, well, am I trying to get in the bad guy's face? Am I telling you about the rock that he's stepping on? Like, you can do things that make more engrossing and fun. I did the Saber Dice game of Numenera, and like the game was run without a whole lot of combat. The combat was pretty much, it's just going to destroy us for most of it.
Right.
So like it was really a challenge. But the GM, he put out things that were hazards and things, so we were always using our abilities. We were always having to do it. So looking back, it's like we really should have been doing the help action far more often to help each other, because we were having such a hard time with just the environment.
Right. I think that's actually the sign of a great GM who's putting stuff out there that's not just the bad guy to fight, but there's all kinds of things that are going on sort of maybe even at the same time, right? So that one character who he's the guy who just likes to bash the skulls of the bad guy, right? He's got something to do. But if there's other things going on in the same place, everybody's got something to do, right? And so maybe there's to just kind of use maybe even a weird example, right? Maybe there's like a lock that has to be picked at the same time, but you have to fight the bad guys off while the rogue is picking the lock, right? And there's and while the cleric is casting a heal or something, so that you've got all these different actions that are kind of applying to all the different players at the same time.
All right, so what other kind of tips and tricks would you offer out there to make this game that much?
Right. So this isn't so much something that you do like in the middle of combat or even maybe necessarily at the table. But one thing that I've found that every group that does this, I think, benefits from it, and that's just having conversations about the game. Like, so for example...
So do you, just to clarify, are we talking in-game or out-of-game or both?
Maybe both.
Okay.
Maybe both, right? But like, so let's say you're going to play Numenera, right? Mm-hmm. Super far in the future. It creates an interesting group dynamic. If even before you're sitting down and you're looking at your character sheets and everything, you're getting set up, maybe you're getting drinks or whatever, right? And you start a conversation like, man, what would it be like? That far in the future, right? And what would the sky, the night sky probably looks different, right? Because the stars have, everything is moved and just kind of have those conversations. And I bring that up because, first of all, it starts to get everybody kind of in the mood, right? And they're thinking about it and everything. But it also creates a stronger bond around the game, right? So if you're playing D&D, right, you can just kind of sit around and, kind of have those BS sessions that you have, right? But you make them about the game. I mean, it's cool to have the conversation that everyone has, about, work sucks today, and, that stuff that you do, right? But if you have conversations that are actually about the game, about the world, it really kind of starts to heighten things, especially over time, where you're thinking about the game in kind of a larger context and more than just, I'm rolling dice.
Well, I think you can take that. You need to think about the setting. You need to think about, are you playing, someone or something that is vastly different? Numenera, we're talking about, many life cycles of the human race,
right.
Ninth World and beyond and what have you. The human race as we know it has vastly been changed.
Right.
Things that we think of as regular technology, are alien to them. They're Cyphers, they're Numenera devices, and you're like, I don't know what this is. I push a button, all of a sudden this giant robot horse appears that works once and then explodes in a whole bunch of pieces.
Right. Exactly.
You could have strange things like that happen. In my game, like we were in a thing, and it's like there's these flat screens with weird moving pictures on them. You don't know what they are. There's these things with looks like water, but colors of globs are moving around, and it's like, it's just a TV screen in a lava lamp. But those characters have no clue what those are.
Right.
But things that we know, for our time, our technology wind up being, strange and possibly unnerving to those characters. If you go into a fantasy setting, it's like, well, what is the mindset of a creature that lives for hundreds of years? How can you grasp that when we're dealing with our, lifespan in decades? It's challenging to deal with, but once you get into the mindset of like, okay, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, it's going to, increase your immersion in the world and that character.
I totally agree. One of my favorites for D&D is thinking about, okay, every wizard that gets to 3rd level and above could potentially become invisible. So you're living in a world where at any moment there could be someone in the room that you can't see, right? And so, I mean, think about the implications that has for, if you own a store or you're maintaining like a court of law, or you start thinking about that, and you're talking about it with your friends. Yeah, you're not playing the game, but you're engaging with the game, and I think in a really interesting way, and with each other, right?
And then to take that advice that one step farther, I think having the conversations in game to build relationships.
Absolutely.
We as players, we live in those characters for snippets of time. And there might be times where, you travel for several days.
Right.
Well, that's said over a sentence. That's said so quickly, but that's 72 hours, 96 hours of monotonous travel. What kind of relationships are building? What kind of, bonds or animosity is happening with these characters? If we look at things like Lord of the Rings and we see the typical, dwarf and elf who despise each other, and over the course of this journey, they become fast friends. Like, these are relationships that build, and getting to see a variety of different streamed games where everybody does it differently, seeing these relationships formed. Yeah, the DM can sit back while you guys just talk, but doesn't the GM do enough work? Give him some time to breathe and have these conversations and build those relationships.
That's a great GM moment, I think, was when you kind of just sit back and you don't have to do anything, right? And the players are all talking. I sometimes call those campfire moments, right? Because everyone's just kind of sitting around the campfire, and you're in character, and you're talking, and maybe you're talking about the previous adventure you were on, or the one you're about to go to, and maybe you start to bring up things from your backstory, right? And all of a sudden that stuff that you scribbled on the back of your character sheet actually becomes relevant,
And I think with your games at your home table, like, you don't have to worry about having all your games streamed. You can just sit there and enjoy your game. But maybe you put stuff in your backstory and you're like, all right, I'm looking for the moment for this to come out. I'm the kind of person that I've always been. I'm gonna write this crazy backstory and I'm gonna share it immediately. And after having watched hours and hours of streamed games, I'm thinking like, all right, for the next character, I do want to write that same enriched backstory. But I'm not gonna, immediately tell it to everybody. I want that to come out in game, and have that be a revelation for the players at the table with me, so that it feels like, oh well, here's a relationship that's being built, being founded, without like, oh well, I already knew that.
Right.
Like, so that like, oh, you're now willing to share that with me. That's cool. That's character development for those characters in the world.
Yeah, one of the things that we just came out with a game called Invisible Sun, and one of the elements of Invisible Sun is that every character has at least one character arc, right? Which is a basically a way of saying what your character goal is. And they don't have to be super long-term goals, right? It can be a short-term. But then the thing about a character arc is that there are steps that you can measure, right? So if you're going on the revenge arc, right, because you're Ignacio Montoya and you after the six-fingered man who killed your father, right?
One of my favorite movies.
Exactly, right? So, but maybe there are steps, right? First, you have to find out where that guy is. You have to find him. You have to confront him, right? And each one of those is a measurable step. And that's the way Invisible Sun works. But in Your Best Game Ever, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to make that so that you can apply that to any role-playing game, because I think it's such a valuable tool in character building.
I agree, and classic example for people out there watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You've got Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
It's like, oh, I must kill Ronan. He killed my family and blah 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 blah, and Ronan's destroyed. And you would think, okay, well, now this character can go and retire. But as a player character looking at this, it's like, no, the campaign's not over yet. All right, well, how do I keep this going? Well, it wasn't Ronan. Ronan was just a tool. It's Thanos who killed it. So, as a player character, you can take those same steps and be like, all right, well, what's the next big boss? Can I get informative and find out what the next thing is? And you link that thing to, all right, well, there's my next goal.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. And one of the things that does is that it really encourages players to be proactive, right?
Yes.
You're not just sitting at the table waiting for the GM to throw the next adventure at you. you are actually saying, okay, I'm going after Thanos now, right? So I'm going to go find where Thanos is. I'm going to, go do whatever it takes to find that out. And suddenly you're driving the adventure, and that's really cool.
And I think some of the best stories that are told out there for role-playing games, regardless of what system, is the choices that are being made by the players in a true sandbox style. A game that I'm running, I hadn't wasn't certain where the campaign was going to go, but halfway through, the players made the choice of all right, this is what we want to do, and I'm like, all right, there's my end goal.
Awesome.
I set it out there. It could have gone in many different directions, and they decided. I'm like, done.
All my favorite tips for players are secretly GM tips to make the players do all the work.
Well, when you've got a fantastic group of players that are going to make those choices, they're going to do the role playing. The campaigns will write themselves because they're going to go out and they're going to do.
And it's going to be more enjoyable for everybody involved, right? Because now you're not doing somebody else's quest, right? You're doing your quest.
So I'm going to throw one more out there before we wrap this up in regards to best game ever. In order to really have a great game, I think you need to get the player characters tied into the story. So you want to make sure that you're fulfilling their character stories, their character arcs. So every once in a while you need to have an adventure that's related to this guy, and he's going to have to bring his friends along, or this gal and bring her friends along, and that's going to make that character immersed in the world. It's like, oh, the story about me really wanting to find my father, you bought into that part of my backstory. Let's go do that. One of my games, I had a player who was like, oh, he's a wizard, I had a halfling wizard mentor. Well, I brought the mentor into the game, and he wound up, the mentor wound up dying and bequeathed his tower to the character. And it's like, you were my last apprentice, I'm giving this to you, I'm dying, I wanted you to be here for my last blah, blah, blah. He died, it was sad, and the player's like, wow, this was really rewarding, thank you for doing that. And, other characters, set forth goals. I was in another game as a player, and the character's main goal was he wanted to get married. So we went on this quest, and as part of the quest reward, the people were like, well, what do you want? How can we help you? He's like, I want a wife. Okay, you can have your pick of our women. And it was like, holy crap, this is weird. But that wound up happening, and it's like, well, that's what that character wanted, and that story arc got resolved for that character.
Yeah, and I think that the thing to remember, the tip there is communication, which kind of ties us all the way back to the beginning, right? Which is, if you've got something that you really want for your character, talk to the GM. Say, I really want this character to do X, right? I want this character to start a business. I want this character to, become nobility or whatever, right? And that doesn't mean that the game master, is just going to give you everything that you want. But that knowledge is going to allow the game master to kind of start shaping stories to allow you a path toward that, right?
To earn it, not just hand it to you.
Exactly.
And there are times where you as the GM say, okay, I put forth this idea out there. The player didn't bite. You put it out there again. The player didn't bite. Okay, well, then you're going to stop putting those type of things out there for that particular arc. And when they bring it up to you, it's like, well, I gave you a couple of choices. You clearly didn't want to go down that path, and that's going to then be a teaching moment for that player out of game. Oh, well, maybe next time I need to be aware of those things.
Right.
And I've seen it, as both a player and as a GM, those moments where the players made the wrong choice for either side.
Right. Or maybe it's a moment where you're like, oh, maybe that actually isn't what I wanted, because you're right. You gave me that choice twice, and I went the other way each time. Maybe I need to rethink my character a little bit, right?
Sometimes characters do wind up changing over the course of the game,
which is awesome.
In the beginning, this is what I wanted, but by the end, that's not where I saw my character going. He evolved, she changed into something else, someone else. And, they might be better off for it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what stories are all about.
Absolutely. So, Monty, thank you so much for hanging out with us here at GenCon.
Absolutely.
Do you want to, talk about the Kickstarter one last time?
Sure. So Your Best Game Ever is on Kickstarter right now. You can also go to montycookgames.com to
Find some amazing products.
All the stuff that we're doing. And please check it out.
Thank you for hanging out with us. You guys out there, if you got any awesome tips or tricks for your best game ever, any stories you want to share, down in the comments below, you can share those stories. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay nerdy.